I think about killing myself quite regularly. I have never been the same man that I was since I was on the drugs or even prior to taking them. I feel like a shell of my former self. Not only do I have the sexual problems that we discuss here, but the depression that accompanies it just drags me down more and more each day. I have imagined and daydreamed quite regularly how I would take my own life. If I didn't have these issues, I would say my life would have been pretty good. I don't really get much joy out of life, and I am barely attracted to women at all anymore. I used to be so passionate about many things in my life. Drumming, music, aquariums, building things, friends, sex, women, bike riding, and just exploring in general. None of that came back after I stopped these drugs. Many doctors just say I have anxiety or that I am depressed. I have less anxiety now than when I ever did, at least I think so. However, this depression is something I never had prior to these drugs. I was miserable and frustrated with my OCD and anxiety, and now I just want to take my life. Relationships that I have had have been ruined because I failed to really make that deep connection with someone. That lust is gone and replaced by actually anxiety. What the fuck is excitement or joy? Where is that euphoria I would get when I would jam on my drums and just feel it coursing through my veins? Where is that feeling where you come alive when you meet a new girl? Why can't I barely get out of my apartment to do things anymore? When before it was so simple and easy. Everything now is such a goddamn chore. I exercise and I eat healthy, and I try so fucking hard every day to keep my head up. I can't relate to the guys anymore when they talk about chicks. I just get a rush of anxiety because I don't get those feelings or urges anymore. My life would have been so awesome without these issues. What moronic doctor puts a 16-year-old kid on pharmaceuticals? What doctor believes there are no long-term issues while taking these medications? How can you be so ignorant? There are probably long-term implications from taking Advil. Fuck, if you ate a chocolate bar every day, it would probably rot your teeth, but the idea of chemicals warping your brain is somehow impossible. I don't get it. This one life that we all have has been absolutely shit on due to greed and ignorance. I hope the manufacturers of these drugs all die a painful death equivalent to what I am feeling every day. I want to die, yet I want to so desperately to live, but this is never going away. Hard to remember exactly, but I think I was 15 when I went on Paxil. It's the weirdest thing, but I remember having a random thought. I wonder if this will stop me from going through puberty. I think it did something weird. I've been on and off Paxil since then, mostly on, and I've had the weirdest sexuality I've never been able to figure out. I was sure I was gay because I wasn't attracted to females, but I wasn't attracted to males either. I thought I was gay because there were guys I liked, but no arousal. The guys I liked were not ones I wanted to be with, they were ones I wanted to be like. I've never had any sexual drive, except those few years before I went on Paxil. Never even had a sex dream, and I dream a lot. Another one. Took Cymbalta in my teens for a little less than a year. After stopping, gradually an extremely low sex drive and ability to be aroused, as well as an overall feeling of apathy, started to develop, and I have been trying to adjust since then. I had some suicidal thoughts and a highly variable mood. At the time I was in junior high. After talking to my parents, they became concerned and took me to, apparently the word psychologist based on following events, psychiatrist. She started me out on Cymbalta at 60 milligrams a day. At the time, my parents and especially I did not know anything about dosing ADs, but from where I stand now, it is extremely odd that she started me out on the highest possible dose that she could. Anyway, I was on Cymbalta for a little less than a year. In February, I decided that I didn't want to be on Cymbalta anymore. I don't remember why, and I quit cold turkey. Apparently my psychiatrist had no problem with this, and I followed through. No more drugs. At the time, I didn't really notice much, but things were probably happening gradually. The first thing I noticed was that my genuine interest in sex had pretty much disappeared. As a boy in his youth, I would say that this was pretty abnormal. At the beginning of puberty, I was very interested in the thought of sex. However, all sex drive, any form of erections, any strong interest in the opposite gender severely declined and sometimes was completely absent a few months after stopping my medication. From what I remember, nothing would arouse me sexually, and at age 18, when I started becoming sexually active, it was an intense struggle to have intimate exchanges with anyone. Now at age 24, I am seeing some consistencies that have remained since stopping my medication. I continue to have issues becoming sexually aroused, and getting an erection is usually very difficult without supplements that promote them. At first I thought it was from watching too much porn, but that hasn't been able to genuinely arouse me for years either, and after abstaining for well over a year and not seeing much of a change, I am starting to very strongly doubt that is my problem. My fiancé has also noticed that I don't really get excited about anything and that my responses are very muted. I've noticed this too, but it's been so long. I thought that it was just a part of my personality. However, I don't think it's normal that I don't usually feel affected or sympathetic about anything. I feel very disconnected from everything, and most things that I do are motivated by a feeling of obligation, like I should do things because they're good for me or because it will help someone else. I don't really get a ton of satisfaction out of much, which was something I've been chalking up to just a mildly low self-esteem. However, I'm sick of feeling flat like this all the time. Another, fluoxetine, discontinued 3 years, age 15. In short, I have been on an SSRI medication for 13 years now. I was put on Paxil at age 14. Yes, that's before that pesky teen suicide black box warning came about. I'm old school. For what was, in hindsight, situational and perfectly understandable anxiety over my dad's cancer diagnosis. The psychiatrist conveyed to me the medication was effective and well tolerated with minimal side effects. Never was I told how difficult it would be to withdraw from, or the long-term side effects. At the time I was blissfully unaware the fact that there were no long-term side effects is because there were no long-term studies on the drug. In effect, I would become over the next decade the long-term study guinea pig. It shouldn't have been this way. No, not at all. I should have gotten off the med within 2 years, as was my original plan. My psychiatrist at the time suggested a much too fast tapering schedule, basically a 1-week taper, and I woke up on the 3rd day of no Paxil feeling like my brain was in a frying pan. It literally hurt to think, and I was getting the brain zaps that felt like my brain was painfully rebooting every few minutes. I was basically bedridden for days, and finally gave up and went back to my psychiatrist for advice on how to get rid of the symptoms. His advice was shocking, and it still hurts me today. He didn't know. He was puzzled at my symptoms and said I should get back on the Paxil. That was the first time I was truly scared in my life. I realized this psychiatric expert didn't know any more than I did about how to get off this medication safely, and that I may be on Paxil for the rest of my life. Immediately thoughts flashed through my head. What's going to happen to my brain long term if I'm on this stuff for life? I'm only 16 now, and my brain is still developing. What is the drug doing to my brain development? But I swallowed those terrible thoughts and kept swallowing my Paxil. Over the next decade I switched to Lexapro and then briefly added Effexor to my Lexapro. As my dad has told me sometimes, a combination of meds is the best way. I trusted my dad and my doc agreed to add the Effexor. As soon as I added the Effexor, I felt like I lost my mojo. It was almost like waking up a different person. My usual connectedness to life was gone. My cognition was fogged and my libido was drastically reduced. And of course all this coincided with me entering my first romantic relationship, which was a lifelong dream for me. The hell I went through in that relationship, where I would try my best to perform sexually but fail, still traumatizes me. Before the Effexor I had quite a strong libido. Eventually the relationship ended, largely due to my sexual issues and emotional blunting. I was only on the Effexor Lexapro combination for about a year. Even though I am now almost 4 years off the Effexor, The symptoms the effects or cause, low libido, emotional blunting, memory, cognition issues are still present. I'm currently tapering off my Lexapro at 10% reductions each month, and hopefully it will be off in next year, still on Lexapro. That will end my 13-year misadventure with SSRIs, medication I didn't even need to be on in the first place. But as for my symptoms abating upon discontinuation of the Lexapro, who knows, that's the worst part. I'm simply stunned that psychiatry has no answers for us ex-psych med users. I know the reasons. There are no long-term studies, and there is this toxic underlying belief that a psych patient should be on their meds for life. You know, just like a diabetic who needs their insulin, which is a bullshit line of logic. I will also add that for some, side effects such as poor cognition and sexual dysfunction persist for years or perhaps permanently after discontinuing meds like SSRI. Has anyone on this board heard of PSSD? It stands for Post-SSRI Sexual Dysfunction. There is a Yahoo group with thousands of users who are suffering from prolonged sexual dysfunction, loss of libido, erectile dysfunction, or loss of lubrication, females, etc., for years after discontinuing their meds. In fact, I've included a link below to a YouTube video of a brave Englishman who has been suffering with PSSD for 11 years after briefly using an SSRI as a teenager. Basically, every time he wants to be sexual, he has to inject his penis to get an erection. That video is gone for obviously embarrassing reasons. I couldn't find it anymore. This isn't something people can talk about. Now, you could say such stories are statistically insignificant, or there's a risk with every medication, but I have two problems with that. One, it's inhuman to reduce someone's suffering by saying they're statistically insignificant. Saying that is statistically insignificant sounds like a convenient way for psychiatrists to use language to make their guilty conscience go away. And two, yes, indeed, there is a risk with every med, but none of us were told of these risks. No psychiatrist ever told me of persistent sexual and mental side effects of these meds, or how hard it would be to get off them. None. And yet when we patients take matters into our own hands and go on support network message boards to learn how to taper safely, and we learn about our symptoms, many psychiatrists dismiss us or get hostile, saying we're reading too much on the internet and the internet can't be trusted. Sorry doc, but you can't have it both ways. And as far as I know, Rob Whittaker, he's a Pulitzer Prize nominated science journalist who has researched psychiatry for over 10 years, and I think this is why his book has claimed such attention. He is an outsider, not another psychiatrist, writing about psychiatry, and his reputation is sterling, and if you read the book carefully, you'll understand his argument is nuanced. He doesn't take an absolute anti-med stance at all. He just wants more transparency in the research and calls for a national discussion about how safe and effective these meds are in the long run. That's fair, isn't it? And yet the psychiatric community has come up with every reason under the sun to blame everything but the meds. They'll blame the patients. It's all in your head. The literature bias studies, and yet the chorus of those wronged by psych meds grows louder every year. I give kudos to Whittaker for suggesting that maybe, just maybe, it's time to start blaming the meds.